Welcome to the Art Studio Insights podcast, where we demystify the creative process and exchange ideas with career-minded artists. With your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We are two emerging artists sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our journey. So if you are not already, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you will be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a little bit of time to encourage you to celebrate the little moments. This can be super, super important in the creative process, but not necessarily one that we remember to do all the time, because really when it boils down to it, you need to be your own hype person. And this felt like a super timely episode for us to be recording, because especially as the holiday season is coming up, I know Adriana and I feel like we're already juggling a million different things and trying to make sure that you keep all the balls juggled so that you don't drop any, but really taking the time to slow down, especially when things get chaotic, so that you don't feel discouraged and you really can get perspective on what you're doing and celebrate all of the wins that you've had along the way.
Yeah, that's really true. And for a lot of us, if you're juggling things and sometimes going 500 miles per hour, it's really easy to just move on to the next thing, right? It's like, oh, got it, but I already have 5 other things, that I have to do today. So you don't pause and take that time to acknowledge, like, no, I got a lot done already. You just rush into the next thing. And anyways,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that we have to work through, and you've all heard it, I'm sure. Self-limiting beliefs are definitely something that can keep us a lot of times from celebrating. So speed is part of it, right? If you're just rushing, right. But then also there's that like little extra voice inside your head that might say like, oh yeah, but you haven't done enough. Like, you could always be doing more. You should have, could have, would have applied to this exhibition or this opportunity. This isn't worth celebrating yet. You're not done. Like, there's still so much to do for whatever your project is.
Right.
Oh, compared to so-and-so, this is nothing. Like, why would I be celebrating this? Like, it's a big deal. Who cares, right? Or things like, oh, it was just luck. I don't really deserve this. Like, things just happen to fall in place. And it's like, they're so negative. And we all have them to one way or another, but being able to pause after you've accomplished something and recognize, hey, I did this. Like, this is so cool, especially, in a creative job. It's so cool we get to do what we do. When those thoughts creep up, it's kind of like acknowledging they're going to come up. It's going to happen. It's kind of normal. But then being like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to eat this slice of pizza to celebrate that I finished my website inventory. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, don't let those self-limiting beliefs, they will creep up. It's normal, but don't let them stop you from celebrating and acknowledging what you have accomplished.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point, especially as we've talked about in the past about as a creative and having your artistic practice. And if you have career business goals, it's different than the normal like day job where you're given a scorecard basically of these are your responsibilities. This is the person you report to. They praise you if you do them well, or you get like reprimanded if you don't. Like, when you work for yourself or you have your own creative vision, there's no one there necessarily celebrating or criticizing. Like, it's all in your head. And I think that's really how you can get so stuck in your own self-limiting beliefs, because you don't have that external community to really combat them all the time. And so it can be so easy to get stuck in the negatives that want to challenge you guys to kind of almost the opposite, get stuck in the opposite of really thinking long-term and taking that time to slow down, look backwards and think, okay, look how far I've already come. And giving yourself the credit of like, you are showing up, you are earning it. Having big, amazing, lofty goals is a wonderful thing and keeps you on track long-term for when you're pushing for them. But also take time to look back and say, wow, I've already accomplished so much. Or like thinking back to a year ago, if they were to see where you are now, what would they be proud of you for doing? And this might not even be things in your studio. It might be learning things about yourself that help influence your creative practice, because no matter what, time is going to pass. And so it's all about like what progress can you make in the time that you have, and then what can you do to take lessons that you've learned and apply them moving forward. So you are showing up and you are earning it. So you might as well celebrate those things that you're doing.
Yeah. And then if the thought creeps in and you're like, well, is it really important to celebrate the milestone? Like, do I have to? Look, this
Yes.
might give you that oomph to keep moving forward. Like our,
Yeah.
creative careers tend to be wild roller coasters, and sometimes being able to acknowledge what you've already accomplished and the goals you've already reached will help you get through the low points, right? When you just
Yeah.
need that little extra encouragement. Plus, if you think about it, by taking the time to celebrate these little milestones, you can pause, that speed train that you're on. You can pause it for a moment at the station and say, okay, what's my progress been like compared to the previous version of myself, not others, of myself? Like, where
Yeah.
was I, like you said, Jackie, where was I a year ago, 6 months ago? And it doesn't have, it can be on many different things. It could be on a painting level or visual artist. So we're going to use that example. But whatever your creative passion is, how far have you come along, over time, right? Oh, I used to, I don't know, draw hands and they were terrible, and now they're very detailed and I can move on to the next thing. But
Yeah.
pause to recognize that, right? And be proud of yourself. Like, this is not the easiest job. It's, I think, the most fun job, but I'm a little biased. It's definitely not an easy job, to be in the creative, business life. But yeah, be proud of yourself, like, for sticking it through.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing too, is making the process enjoyable, right? Like so many times we hear it, you got to do it for the process. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey, and all of those very cover of notebook type quotes that we see everywhere. And I think celebrating the little wins is a huge part of that. Because yes, you can like maybe shout yourself out on social media or on the newsletter and like share with your community. But really, the important part is acknowledging it with yourself. You don't even have to like stand on the rooftops and scream, I am so great. Look at all the things I've accomplished. That
Please
might
don't.
come off, that might come off the wrong way. But I think really acknowledging to yourself and having that validation of I am doing this and being proud of yourself is a huge part of enjoying the process even more. And so there are so many things that you can do, big and small, to make yourself proud on the journey. And that it truly is what it's all about, because none of us are creating a body of artwork to feel worse about ourselves, right?
No.
We're not building an art business and pushing towards big goals to be miserable the entire way. As I always joke with people, like if you're going to be miserable during the journey, you might as well just commit to a day job that has a more consistent paycheck and like state benefits, because you need to enjoy what you're doing and you need to enjoy the process, because it is time, or like life is too precious to be miserable the entire time. So you're already putting the work in, you're already earning all of these milestones. So you might as well be celebrating them too.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so true in many ways to say there are easier ways to make money.
Yeah.
Like, you should at least enjoy the process, when it comes to not just the art making, but also building your art business. I mean,
Right.
you can sell cupcakes around the corner or go work at a coffee shop or in an office, whatever. Or you spend this time building your own business, working for yourself, and making the art that you love and that other people
Right.
connect with. So, I mean, pick your poison, right?
Yeah.
But let's give you some examples, right? What kind of things can you celebrate? So some of them are going to be a little obvious, like, oh, I finished this new painting. And for a lot of us, our latest painting is our new favorite painting. So there's that. Um,
Right.
or you finished a series, maybe you set out to make, 10, 15, 20 paintings on whatever it is, and you accomplished it. So you get to celebrate that. Um, Maybe you learned a new medium, right? So you were more into oils and you gave acrylics a shot, or vice versa.
Yeah, that's a big
Or a
one.
new creative tool, like, oh, you learned that you don't have to use brushes to make a painting. Maybe you can use a spreader. And suddenly the lights went on, like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, right? Like, that kind of thing. You get to have that little moment. Think of it not just as that moment of delight, but take it a little bit further and celebrate it. Another one is maybe you found this new organization system that is a game changer, which I will definitely talk about at some point.
Yes.
Um,
Me every single day. Look at this new pegboard setup I have.
or me, I'm like, look at this new app that like helps me organize all the 5 billion things I gotta do.
Oh
It's
yeah.
amazing. My inventory is updated. Maybe you finished reading an amazing art book and now your heart is full, you feel so inspired, you want to move on. If your itinerary is that busy and you finished an actual book from cover to cover, you get to celebrate that. Come on.
Yes.
um I mean,
Because
it
that
could be
takes
anything.
conscious effort to like block off that time. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big thing with a lot of these milestones is that clearly it was something either important enough to you to prioritize, or if it is for a larger project and there is an actual deadline, okay, you met the deadline and had to figure out this new system or product or tool. And so prioritizing that and all the other things that we have in life to prioritize, celebrating, I made this a priority, I made it happen. And now you can move forward with the benefit and the knowledge and the experience of knowing that now. That's something that you didn't know 3 months ago, whether it be, again, knowledge or this is the best system for doing this task. And just makes your life easier as all these little wins start piling up.
Yeah. So, okay, so those are some examples, but let's actually share from from our life experience. Jackie,
Yes.
why don't you go ahead and go first? Give us a few examples of, different wins that you had and how, twist, how did you celebrate them? And it
Oh
can be
man.
really simple, but what are a few wins that you've had recently and how did you celebrate them?
Oh man. So thinking a little bit more long term. So about 2 months ago, I moved studios, which I felt like was a really big win from me, simply because having an out of studio or out of home studio was a huge goal of mine when I first started my creative business, and really being intentional about making it a business. So even having a studio was a huge goal, yet alone getting a larger space. That was a huge accomplishment. And of course, with anyone knows when they're moving anything, you're just so busy with, okay, preparing, packing, buying new materials, giving the new studio a facelift, painting, reinstalling. Like it's so much go, 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 especially when you have events in the middle of that you're trying to hit deadlines for. And so the other day I was in my studio one morning and just kind of like sitting back and reflecting on how cool is it that this is the life I get to be living right now? Like waking up early in the morning, coming into my studio. And I always have that assessment in my brain of like, what would 8-year-old Jackie be thinking of this? And I'd be
Aww.
like, she'd be like, this is freaking amazing. You go. Like she would be so excited. And I don't know, it's just one of those moments of like, my younger self being happy for my current self. That like this is what I get to be doing in such a beautiful space. So moving studios was a huge accomplishment that I was very excited about on kind of a smaller scale.
How did you
Um,
celebrate it though?
oh, how did I
Okay.
celebrate it?
Yeah.
Let's see. I think really just giving myself that morning, and that kind of goes into my second win of like, I've been prioritizing my mornings in my studio a lot more. And so it sounds kind of weird of like, I'm going to celebrate an accomplishment in my
By
business and
waking
my
up earlier.
creative practice by waking up at 4 a.m. But for me, like that truly is life giving, and like getting into the studio when it's like super quiet, it feels like the rest of the world is asleep, and having that focused time just on me. I have no expectations. I have no necessarily concrete goals of how I need to spend that time, and simply doing what feels good, which is painting and watching the sunrise and drinking coffee. Like that is my treat to myself, is like prioritizing that time and kind of getting off the to-do list and truly disconnecting, which is what it's all about, right? Like that makes me enjoy the process even more. Um, Another smaller win is something that I've been wanting to prioritize more art, I guess, creating multiple series at one time, including very specific color schemes and exploring the ideas and concepts in between multiple series at one time. And now that I have a larger studio to do that, I have been doing that the past few weeks, which has felt so good. So taking a little trick out of Adriana's sketchbook of creating like color journals and saying, okay, this series is specifically going to use this color scheme or that color scheme is, again, it might just be a standard part of someone's practice, but it's something that I've always wanted to do and I just haven't in the past. So kind of acknowledging, yes, is it like, yes, I'm doing it. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. Will I evolve and iterate on it? Hopefully, because that's the whole point, is like just get incrementally better over time. So it's definitely not as organized as I want. It's definitely not a perfect workflow, but I'm taking steps towards getting there one day. And it feels good to at least like start the process. Because as we say, like messy, massive action is better than perfect passive action, which is from the book Big Magic. And I think about that all the time. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. It's not going to be your final iteration. You don't have to have the perfect sequence when you start. You just have to start. And so I was celebrating that the other day. And the process of making the artwork is kind of that celebration, so to speak.
Nice.
How about you, Adriana?
So I tend to keep it much simpler, to be honest. You could say I'm kind of food motivated. So a lot of times, either food or plants, a lot of times, I may celebrate or art supplies. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, mine's a little bit more, I guess, consumption items in a way.
No, that makes sense.
But
I think that makes sense with like, sometimes I'll reward myself, I guess, with, it's funny you mentioned that because like I reward myself with how I spend my time. So I like treat myself to like relaxing, or I'll like, okay, I'm treating myself to play pickup volleyball on a Sunday morning until whatever time I feel like it, versus, okay, I'm going to buy coffee or buy supplies. And so there are several forms of how you can reward yourself too, which is really fun.
yeah, like mine, I may finish a series or a set of paintings, and then my reward might be like, okay, I'm gonna get pizza, a slice of pizza from my favorite place, and place an order online for new paint. And then once it arrives, in a way, there is that time. Most of you probably know by now, I'm very, very much into color mixing. So I'll sit there with my color mixing journal and take the time to just experiment with different colors, making new formulas. And that to me is like happy zone, right? Or I may order a new art book and just sit there and read it. Or sometimes the reward is just Netflix, to be honest. I mean, like, there's a show I'm really into, and my to-do list might have 5 billion gazillion things to do, but you know what? I'm just going to take the rest of the evening off and just watch TV, So like I said, mine's a little bit simpler, or a little bit more, direct,
more tangible, I think.
Well, and it's also a little faster, like instant gratification almost, but it still helps me, especially when it comes to things like art supplies or bugs. It still helps me kind of feed back into my creative practice, especially if it's a book or a material, where now I get to incorporate this into the future. The food, well, that's just for fun, but it usually tends to be, I tend to celebrate by getting somewhat practical things that still feed into my practice, if that makes any sense.
No, I think that does make total sense. And I think that's a great habit or thing to consider for a lot of people, whether it's purposeful time out of the studio in terms of like recharging your batteries, or like reading a book, going out in nature, playing volleyball for me, or like something that is very tangible in terms of will help propel your creative practice forward. So both are like fueling you and getting momentum in the same direction that you're going, which I think is a great way to celebrate those wins. And even just like sharing it with your art friends too. Like you and I are always the first ones to run down the hall and be like, look at these paintings I just finished. Or like in our weekly meetings, we'll
this
do that.
awesome book we just read. You got to read it too. Check it out.
Yes, exactly. So we are constantly sharing stuff with each other, both like wins and, okay, I'm struggling with this, so the other person can help support them. So having that community is a great way also to help you celebrate those milestones. But even if you don't necessarily have one other person or a community that you can share with, you can just combat the discouragement and celebrate it yourself. So that's one thing I want to challenge all of our listeners to do. If you find that it's hard to really celebrate those little milestones, I have found in the past, it's really nice just sitting down, maybe have your favorite cup of coffee or tea, whether in the morning or in the evening, anytime where it's really quiet, where you can sit with your own thoughts and just list out all the things that you have done, or maybe you've learned over the past year, month, or week. And this can be with your creative practice, with your creative business, or even just life in general. And like, what steps towards your goals or learning lessons have you been able to accomplish? Because both of them are super, super valuable. And then you have those wins where you can confide in a friend about them and really just not look for external validation, but know within yourself that like, these are things that I'm doing. And these are things that are going to fire me up and keep me going in the direction that I know I want to be going long-term.
Yeah. And yeah, if you definitely feel some of that discouragement, definitely reach out. You know, there's plenty of other artists out there that may be feeling the same way as you are. So whether you feel, you know, find them through social media or in person, etc. But we all go through these same set of insecurities to feels like, you know, and talking to other artists is like, wait, you felt that way too? What?
Right.
What's going on? So, you know, do reach out, do talk to other artists. Chances are they've gone through the same things. You can exchange ideas on how to get out of the slump and then turn around and recognize. A lot of times you may talk to another artist and you're like, yeah, I feel like, you know, I feel terrible about the series. I could have done more. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? It's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you need to hear that. No, we're not saying crave the validation, but we're saying
right.
sometimes getting that second opinion, third opinion can help it turn around for you. If you're stuck and can't turn yourself around, you know, maybe reaching out and talking to somebody will help it turn around for you. But
yeah, exactly. And really, I think the biggest thing is if you truly cannot think of anything, I guarantee you there is something that you can celebrate. But if you truly feel like you can't think of anything, set a goal and then work towards it. So set whether it's a 7-day challenge or what's one thing that you can do today that your future self will thank you for doing. And then once you accomplish it, you can celebrate that. All the little wins and big wins along the way are worth celebrating. So if you feel like there isn't anything, that I guarantee there's something you can do today that will help your future self that you can celebrate.
All right. So as always, we hope you enjoyed this episode. That's a wrap on today's conversation.
As always, both of our blogs will be linked in the show notes where you can find episode notes and links to all of our other podcast episodes.
If you want to stay connected with us on social media, if you want to stay candid with us in between episodes and share what you have learned, you can follow us on social media, MMA Art, across all platforms.
And I am at J Sanders Studio across all platforms. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.